The phone screamed at 5:47 a.m., and Tom Harrison's coffee went cold in his hands. Nothing good comes before 6. Nothing. His brother David's voice cracked through the line like breaking ice. Tom, it's over. The bank sent the notice yesterday. 60 days or they take everything. Tom's stomach dropped because he knew this call was coming. Had been dreading it for 2 years, ever since the farm crisis started swallowing Iowa whole in 1983, ever since interest rates exploded and crop prices collapsed, and banks started picking off farmers one by one like wolves. But hearing it out loud made it real in a way that turned his blood to ice. How much? Tom asked, already knowing the answer would be impossible. 187,000 total. They want 63,000 right now to stop foreclosure. Tom, I don't have it. I'm done. David's voice shattered on that last word, and Tom heard something that made his chest tighten. His 42-year-old brother was crying. Crying because he was about to lose Grandpa's farm, the land their family had worked since 1928. 400 acres of Iowa soil that had fed Harrisons for 3 generations. Tom looked out at his own farm, 640 acres he'd bought in 1976. Paid for, debt-free, safe. He'd been conservative while David chased expansion. Now David was drowning while Tom stood on solid ground. But what Tom said next would change everything. Don't do anything yet. Let me think. He hung up and sat in silence so heavy it hurt to breathe. Tom knew exactly why David was failing. The same reason hundreds of Iowa farmers were going under. David had borrowed massive amounts in the late 70s and early 80s when land prices were skyrocketing and everyone said they'd never fall. Bought more land, upgraded equipment, expanded aggressively, while Tom warned him to slow down. You're taking on too much debt, Tom had said back then. What if prices drop? David had laughed in his face. Prices won't drop. Land values only go up. I'm building something big here, Tom. You're too conservative. You'll regret not expanding when you had the chance. But David was wrong about everything. Corn crashed from $4.20 a bushel in 1980 to $2.40 in '83. Soybeans plummeted from $7.60 to $5.20. Land values collapsed from $2,000 per acre to $1,200 overnight. And interest rates? David's loans that started at 14% adjusted to 19%, then 20%. The math became a noose around his neck. Tom had watched his brother work 100-hour weeks trying to outrun the numbers. Watched David's marriage disintegrate. His wife left in '84, took the kids, left David alone in that farmhouse with nothing but debt and desperation. Now the bank was closing in for the kill. Tom spent that morning thinking about his savings. $68,000 in the bank, 18 years of conservative farming, living cheap, never borrowing, banking every extra dollar while other farmers bought new trucks and took vacations. He could give David the $63,000 and stop the foreclosure. Save the family farm. But would that really help? David would still owe $124,000 with sky-high interest rates and collapsed crop prices. Saving him now might just delay the inevitable. Unless Tom did something nobody expected. Unless he actually fixed the problem instead of just throwing money at it. What Tom was about to do would either save them both or destroy them both. Tom drove to David's farm that afternoon and found his brother in the machine, shed sitting on an old tractor, staring at nothing like a ghost. David. His brother looked up with eyes so red and hollow Tom barely recognized him. Tell me everything. Every debt, every payment, every number. I need to see the whole picture. They spent 3 hours going through David's finances, and it was worse than Tom imagined. Total debt $187,000. Land mortgage $112,000 at 19%. Equipment loans $48,000 at 18%. Operating line of credit $27,000 at 21%. Annual debt service $38,400. David's farm income in '84, $22,000 net after operating costs. He was $16,000 short every year just on debt payments. Couldn't make it. Behind on payments by $63,000 accumulated over 2 years, and the bank was done waiting. Tom looked at his brother and asked the question that would reveal just how hopeless this was. If I pay the $63,000 to stop foreclosure, can you make the regular payments going forward? David's answer was a knife. No, I'm still $16,000 short annually. I can't generate enough income to cover debt service. Even if you stop foreclosure, I'll just fall behind again. The truth hung between them like a death sentence. Then Tom said something he hadn't planned to say, something that would change both their lives forever. I'll buy half your farm. Pay cash. You use the money to pay off all debt, then you farm the remaining land debt-free. David stared at him like he'd spoken in a foreign language. What? Tom laid it out with the calm certainty of a man who'd done the math and knew it would work. Your 400 acres is worth $480,000 at current prices of $1,200 per acre. I'll pay you $240,000 cash for half. That's 200 acres to me, 200 to you. You take the 240, pay off the 187 in debt. Keep 53,000 for operating cash. You farm 200 acres debt-free. I farm my 640 plus the 200 I'm buying from you. We both survive. The silence stretched so long Tom thought David hadn't heard him. Then his brother's voice came out broken. Tom, that would cost you everything you've saved. I have 68,000 saved, Tom said quietly. I need to take out a loan for the rest. 172,000. But I can handle that on 840 acres. You can't handle 187 on 400 acres. The math works for me. Doesn't work for you. David stared at him, with tears streaming down his face. You'd go into debt to save me? After I ignored your warnings? After I was arrogant and stupid? Tom's answer was simple. To save the family farm and to help my brother? Yeah, I would. David started crying again, this time with something that might have been hope breaking through the despair. I don't deserve this. Tom's voice was firm. Doesn't matter now. What matters is solving the problem. Will you do it? But here's the twist nobody saw coming. The next morning at First National Bank in Hampton, the loan officer Jim Peterson, the same guy who'd been pressuring David for 2 years, looked at Tom's plan and smiled. Not a friendly smile. A predator's smile. Your brother defaults, and you bail him out by taking on debt yourself. Why would you do that? Tom kept his voice steady, even though he wanted to punch Jim Peterson in his smug face. Because he's my brother, and because the math works for me even though it didn't work for him. I can carry 172 in debt on 840 acres. He couldn't carry 187 on 400. Scale matters. Jim Peterson leaned back in his chair, studying them like bugs under glass. What stops David from failing again on the 200 acres? Tom had the answer ready. No debt. He can survive on 200 debt-free acres. Won't make a fortune, but won't lose the farm either. It's sustainable. Jim looked at David with something close to contempt. You're okay with this? Giving up half the family farm? David's voice was quiet, but firm. And in that moment, Tom saw a glimpse of the brother he used to know. I'd rather farm 200 acres debt-free than lose all 400 to the bank. This keeps the Harrison family on Harrison land. That matters more than acreage. Jim approved the deal, but what nobody realized was that Tom Harrison had just made the biggest gamble of his life. He borrowed $172,000 at 16% interest. Used that plus his $68,000 savings to buy 200 acres from David for $240 total. David paid off all his debt, $187,000 to clear everything, left him with $53,000 operating cash. The foreclosure was stopped. The family farm was saved, but split in half. The community reaction was brutal. Some people thought Tom was a hero. That's incredible. He went into debt to save his brother. That's family loyalty. But others thought Tom was the biggest fool in Franklin County. David made his own mess. Why should Tom sacrifice everything he built to bail him out? David will probably fail anyway. Tom ignored the criticism and focused on making it work because he had to. Annual payment at 16% was $27,500. Tom could cover that plus operating costs plus living expenses on 840 acres. It was tight, dangerously tight, but doable. David farmed his 200 acres with no debt, netted about $18,000 annually, lived cheap, rebuilt his life one painful inch at a time. The first year, 1985, was hell for both brothers. Low crop prices, high costs. Both struggled, but both survived. In 86, prices improved slightly and they both caught a breath. By 87, they were actually making progress. But then came 1988 and the drought that almost destroyed everything Tom had sacrificed for. The Midwest drought of 1988 was catastrophic. Corn yields dropped by 40%. Soybean yields by 35%. Tom's debt was based on normal yields, but nature didn't care about his calculations. His net farm income dropped from $42,000 to $18,000. His debt service was $27,500. The numbers stopped working. Tom was $9,500 short that year. He covered it with credit, emergency operating loan. But 1989 wasn't much better. Another $10,000 in credit. By 1990, Tom had taken on $34,000 in additional debt just to survive the drought years. His total debt was now $206,000, higher than when he started. And here's what nobody tells you about farming. Once you start that slide, it's almost impossible to stop. Tom was now in the exact position David had been in. Too much debt, not enough income, the math turning against him. In 1991, Tom's bank, the same First National where Jim Peterson worked, called him in for a review. Jim looked at Tom's numbers, and that predator smile came back. "You're over-leveraged, Tom. We're concerned about your ability to service this debt. We're going to need you to bring your account current, or we'll have to consider our options." Tom sat across from Jim Peterson feeling like the world was tilting sideways. After everything he'd sacrificed to save David, after taking on debt to keep the family farm in Harrison hands, after 3 years of drought and struggle, the bank was about to do to him what he'd prevented them from doing to David. But Tom Harrison had one card left to play. "Give me 1 year," Tom said. "1 year to turn this around. If I can't get current by end of 92, you can do whatever you want." Jim Peterson studied him with cold banker's eyes. 1 year. But if you're not current by December 31st, 1992, we foreclose. No more extensions. Tom walked out of that bank, knowing he'd just bet everything on a single year. What happened next shocked everyone. Tom went to David that night and laid out the situation. "I'm in trouble. The drought years put me underwater. Bank's threatening foreclosure if I can't get current by end of 92. I need $28,000 to survive." David sat there silent for a long moment. Then he opened his desk drawer and pulled out a bank book. "I have $32,000 saved. It's yours." Tom stared at his brother in disbelief. "David, that's everything you've saved since I bailed you out. 4 years of saving every penny." David's voice was rock solid. "You saved me when I was drowning. Now I'm returning the favor. That's what family does." The twist came full circle. The brother Tom saved was now saving Tom. David gave Tom $28,000 in cash. Tom brought his account current. The bank backed off. Crisis averted. But the real miracle was what came after. In 1992, crop prices finally rebounded. Corn went to $275, soybeans to $580. Tom had his best year ever, $54,000 net income. He paid David back the $28,000 plus $4,000 interest, paid down his debt by $18,000. By 1993, he was profitable again. By 1994, he'd reduced his total debt to $168,000, lower than when he started. The gamble worked. Both brothers survived. But wait. There's more to this story that will blow your mind. Remember how David was saving money every year? Living on $12,000 annually and banking $6,000? By 1994, David had accumulated $78,000, enough to buy back 100 acres from Tom. The land he'd lost, he was earning back through discipline and sacrifice. Tom sold him 100 acres at market price, $1,200 per acre, $120,000 total. David paid $78,000 cash and borrowed $42,000 at reasonable rates. Now David owned 300 acres with minimal debt. Tom owned 740 with $146 in debt after selling the land. Both brothers were stronger than before, but the transformation wasn't just about numbers. David started going to church again after years of absence, found community, found peace. He reconnected with his daughters who'd barely spoken to him during the crisis years, made effort, drove to see them every other weekend, rebuilt relationships one conversation at a time. In 1991, David met Susan at church, a widow, 52 years old, farm background. They married in 92. Simple wedding, 30 people, no debt. Susan brought stability and joy David hadn't felt in years. When David bought back that 100 acres in 94, Susan cried. "You did it! You earned back part of what you lost!" David's daughters came to the land closing, both in their 20s now. Seeing their father own 300 acres again meant everything. His older daughter told him something that broke and healed him at the same time. "Dad, I'm proud of you. You lost everything and you rebuilt. That takes strength." David's reply revealed the truth of what really saved him. "I didn't rebuild alone. Uncle Tom saved me. Your Uncle Tom sacrificed everything to give me another chance. Never forget that." And they didn't forget. At Tom's retirement party in 2008, both daughters gave speeches about the uncle who'd saved their father and preserved their family legacy. The story spread through Franklin County like wildfire. But here's what nobody talks about. While Tom saved David, hundreds of other Iowa farms were lost to foreclosure. In Franklin County alone, 73 farms were foreclosed between 83 and 86. 73 families lost their land. 73 legacies ended. The Johnsons 3 miles south of David lost their farm in April 85. Same month David would have lost his without Tom. The Johnsons had farmed that land since 1922. Gone. The Mitchells 5 miles east lost theirs in June 85. 600 acres, 3 generations. Bank took it all, sold at auction for 63% of value. The Andersons, the Petersons, the Williams family, all gone, all foreclosed, all victims of the same crisis that nearly took David. What made David different? He had a brother willing to sacrifice. The other families didn't have that. They faced foreclosure alone, fought it alone, lost alone. David attended Bob Johnson's auction in April 85. Watched Bob and his wife stand by their pickup truck crying as strangers bid on equipment that had been in their family for decades. Tractors sold for 50 cents on the dollar. After the auction, Bob shook David's hand with tears in his eyes. "You got lucky, David. Your brother saved you. I didn't have anyone. Now it's gone." David never forgot that moment, the randomness of it. He could easily have been Bob Johnson, would have been without Tom. That realization kept David humble for the rest of his life. He never took his second chance for granted. In 1998, when Bob Johnson needed help, David remembered. Bob had been working as a machinist since losing his farm, making $32,000 per year, struggling. David hired Bob as a farmhand, paid him $28,000 plus benefits, gave Bob a chance to work land again, even though it wasn't Bob's land anymore. Bob worked for David until retiring in 2006. At Bob's retirement party, he told David something that revealed the ripple effect of Tom's sacrifice. "Thank you for letting me farm again. I lost my land, but you gave me back the work I love." David's response captured everything. "My brother gave me a second chance. I'm passing it forward." That was the ripple effect of Tom's sacrifice. Tom saved David. David helped Bob. Kindness multiplying through the community, like seeds spreading across a field. But people always asked Tom the same question. How did he make the math work? How did he afford $172 in debt at 16% on 840 acres when David couldn't afford $187 on 400? The answer was scale and efficiency, but the details are what made it possible. David's situation in 85, 400 acres, 187 debt to asset ratio 39%, annual debt service 38,400, net farm income 22,000, deficit 16,400 annually. Unsustainable. David couldn't cover debt service with farm income, was going deeper in the hole every year. But Tom's situation after buying 200 acres from David, 840 acres, 172 debt to asset ratio 17%, annual debt service 27,500, net farm income 38 to 46,000 depending on year, surplus 10 to 18,000 annually. Sustainable. Tom could cover debt service and have operating margin. The larger scale made the debt manageable because operating costs don't scale linearly with acres. Tom's operating costs on 840 were approximately $420 per acre. David's operating costs on 400 were approximately $540 per acre. The difference, $120 per acre, meant Tom could generate more net income per acre. On 840 acres, that difference was over $100,000 in efficiency advantage. Plus, Tom had no debt service before the bailout, had been farming conservatively, had systems and equipment in place. Adding 200 acres didn't proportionally increase his costs. David had been operating at maximum leverage with no room for error. Any decrease in income was catastrophic. Tom had room, could absorb setbacks, could weather bad years. That's why the math worked for Tom but not for David. Not luck, not magic, just scale, efficiency, and conservative prior management. Tom Harrison's sacrifice raised a question that farmers debated for years. When does it make sense to risk everything to save someone else? Some argued Tom was foolish. David made bad decisions. Why should Tom pay for them? Let David face consequences. Others argued Tom was noble. That's what family does. You help when someone's drowning. But Tom's perspective was different from both camps. "I didn't sacrifice blindly," Tom would say years later. "I ran the numbers. I knew I could handle the debt. If I couldn't have, I wouldn't have done it. This wasn't emotional. It was calculated." But then he'd pause and add the truth. "But it was also emotional. I loved my brother. Couldn't stand watching him lose the family farm when I had the means to prevent it." The key factors that made Tom's sacrifice work reveal why most bailouts fail, but this one succeeded. 1. Tom had the financial capacity. He could afford to take on debt at his scale. If he'd been struggling himself, the sacrifice wouldn't have worked. 2. The math was sound. Tom didn't just throw money at the problem. He restructured it so both brothers could survive long term. 3. David was worth saving. Despite his mistakes, David was hardworking and honorable. He'd made bad financial decisions, not moral failures. He deserved a second chance. 4. The farm meant something. 4 generations of family history was worth preserving. 5. Tom could accept the risk. He and his wife Martha understood they might struggle. They chose to anyway. Not every situation merits sacrifice, but this one did, and Tom executed it perfectly. The bank expected foreclosure. Tom made sure they didn't get it through sacrifice, yes, but also through smart math, careful planning, and understanding what was truly at stake. By 2008, when Tom retired, he'd farmed for 42 years, owned 740 acres debt-free, had $240,000 in savings. David owned 300 acres debt-free, had $112,000 saved. Both brothers retired successfully. Both kept their land in the family. Tom's son took over Tom's operation. David's younger daughter and her husband took over David's farm. The Harrison family legacy survived when it should have ended in 1985. At Tom's funeral in 2019 at age 83, over 400 people attended. David gave the eulogy and said something that captured everything. "My brother saved me when I deserved to fail. He risked everything he'd built to give me another chance. He didn't do it for recognition or praise. He did it because that's who he was." Tom Harrison believed in family, believed in second chances, believed in doing what's right even when it cost you everything. The land we're standing on today, Harrison land farmed by Harrisons, exists because one man decided his brother mattered more than his bank account. The church was silent except for the sound of people crying. David continued with his voice breaking. "I spent the rest of my life trying to be worthy of what Tom gave me. I hope I succeeded." This is the story that farming communities tell when they talk about sacrifice, when they debate whether you should help someone who made bad decisions, when they wonder if family loyalty means anything anymore. The answer is in the fields. 840 acres still farmed by Harrisons because one brother refused to let the other drown. Because Tom Harrison understood something most people miss. Sometimes the math works, sometimes it doesn't. But family is the equation that matters most. The bank wanted the farm in 1985. Tom's sacrifice ensured they didn't get it. And both brothers built successful futures because one was willing to risk everything for the other. That's family. That's farming. That's what matters when everything falls apart. The phone rang at 5:47 a.m. and changed 2 lives forever. What would you do if your brother called you with 60 days before losing everything? Would you run the numbers? Would you risk your life savings? Would you take on massive debt to save someone who ignored your warnings? Tom Harrison didn't hesitate. He ran straight into the fire because the farm meant something, because his brother meant something, because some things matter more than staying safe. 73 farms in Franklin County were lost between 1983 and 1986. But this one survived. Not because of luck, because one man decided that sacrifice was worth it if it meant keeping his brother's head above water. If this story moved you, if you understand why Tom Harrison risked everything, if you believe in second chances and family loyalty and the kind of sacrifice that changes generations, drop a comment below. Tell me if you would have done what Tom did. Tell me if you think David deserved to be saved. Tell me your own story of sacrifice or the person who saved you when you were drowning. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, because there are thousands more stories like this one. Stories of ordinary people making impossible choices that change everything. Stories that remind us what really matters when the world falls apart. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another story about the power of sacrifice, the strength of family, and the courage it takes to risk everything for the people you love.